So, welcome to our OCD Excellence podcast. We're going to talk today about the concept of interoception. I'm excited to welcome Ian Tennant and Joe Mackenzie from the Interoception project, which was set up to share the latest understanding of how this special type of body awareness shapes our well-being. And getting to this point has been something of a journey for me. So ever since I read Lisa Feldman Barrett's book, How Emotions Are Made, The Secret Life of the Brain. Working in the field of OCD, I'm helping clients on a daily basis cope with overwhelming emotions that are disabling. In fact, the science seems to point to the fact that people with OCD are emotionally hypersensitive. So Lisa's neuroscientific work, which points to the fact that brains didn't evolve to react to the world, but rather to predict how we're going to respond, is a game changer. She says, brains didn't evolve for rationality. They did not evolve for you to think or to perceive the world accurately. Brains evolved to regulate a body so that it could move around the world efficiently. So cue Ian and Joe from the Interoception project who are going to explain to us what this really means. Over to you, Ian and Joe. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, please tell us a little about yourselves and your work at Interoception.
Thanks, India. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I'm so glad that Joe put us in touch. Like you, I was incredibly excited to find out about the game-changing, as you said, perspective that Lisa Feldman Barrett has brought to us all through How Emotions Are Made. And so a little bit about my background before I pass you over to Joe. So for the past just over 13 years, I've worked as a hands-on therapist doing massage and other soft tissue therapies, as well as health coaching. Before that, I worked in a more kind of techie laboratory-based research career, studying immunology and how our body detects something that's safe and how it distinguishes safety from threat. So when I started working with whole people rather than cells under the microscope and kind of thought about how we detect something as safe or not, and how that manifests in people's bodies in everyday life in terms of pain and discomfort and injuries and how they describe their experience, I became very curious about people's stories and their bodies. But still at that point, there was this idea that our mental functions are very distinct from what people feel in terms of discomfort in their body. As I'm sure we'll talk about more in this conversation, it led me down a path of curiosity, which when I stumbled upon the new science of interoception, my ears pricked up and I thought I want to get involved in that somehow. And then a couple of years later, I was introduced to a woman from Anglia Ruskin University who studies interoception. And we collaborated this year on a research project to help people to test this idea of training for improving our body awareness and to look at the effects of that on well-being. And it's been a really exciting journey and there's lots more to discover. And Joe has joined us. I'll let him explain, his interest in OCD and how it relates to what we do at Interoception. Joe joined it's getting on for 5 months ago now to help with, I'll let you explain, Joe, what your role is.
Okay, so I joined Ian about 5 months ago, I think in July. And my role is junior project manager. So Ian's let me take control of the social media, trying to build this brand so that we can, bring awareness to people of interoception and how that can help people with all sorts of mental illnesses, not just, stress and anxiety and depression, because there is evidence that it can really help with a lot of different illnesses. And the reason why I decided to go for this role is because I've got my own experience with mental health, and people around me have as well. So recently, in the past maybe 2-3 years, I've started to really get into learning about mental illness and thinking about ways that we can help other people to get through this, and the awareness that there is in, you know, social media and just between people on the news of what mental illnesses really are. And I think it's really good. I think we're getting somewhere, and I think that interoception is a very good way for people to progress their journey of recovery.
We all three of us realize that the concept of interoception has been established in neuroscience, but for the general public, this is a fairly new concept. And whenever I ask anyone if they know what it is, I've had all sorts of answers, including, isn't it that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? But on that note, I would love for you, Ian and Joe, to explain to us what interoception is.
Brilliant question, and a great place to start. So, the word interoception, it's not the sexiest word out there. And as you said, it sounds so much like that film Interception. And it also sounds like introspection, a very similar word, which people may think we're talking about. But in simple terms, interoception is the ability to sense what's going on inside our body. So there will be times when we've all noticed our heart beating faster than normal, or we've noticed feelings of hunger, or maybe a tightness in your chest, a gripping in your stomach. They're all types of interoceptive awareness, so a type of body awareness. Now, if we're going to categorize all our senses as separate, we've got our common ones such as vision and sound and hearing and sense of smell. But then we've also got another type of body awareness which in scientific terms is called proprioception. And that's the ability, we can all do this right now. So if we close our eyes and either touch your nose or put your hand over your head, you've got this ability to sense where different body parts are in space and time. So that's another sense. But interoception it's like that ability to sense body parts, but it's sensing signals from inside the body that are informing the brain about how it's doing, how well it's doing in the business of staying alive. So the interesting thing is with interoception, as we'll come on to discuss, then it's been linked to the ability for people to sense what's going on inside the body varies greatly. And the difference in ability has been linked to different conditions, including OCD, but anxiety, depression, and also at the other end of the spectrum, people who are really good at sensing and interpreting what's going on inside their body seem to perform better. And there's some evidence that it can even help you function more in your work, you last longer without burnout, and maybe even earn more if you're in tune with your body. So Joe, maybe you can give your experience of, from people around you about how this might relate to common mental health challenges.
Yeah, I mean, anxiety is a big one. Anxiety, when someone's feeling really anxious or they're having an anxiety attack, that's really physical. So being able to sense inside your body where that's happening, that could help to stop people from having anxiety attacks. They can sense it before it comes on, and then they can, perform the appropriate actions to help reduce the effects of an anxiety attack, like slow breathing, mindfulness, and meditation.
We know nothing about interoception. If you could just explain it in lay terms. Right. So I'm just going to go slightly off tangent here. We obviously work a lot with mindfulness and acceptance commitment therapy with OCD. So we are certainly with acceptance commitment therapy, we do encourage clients to be aware of what's going on in their body. And so with OCD, the experience of OCD, particularly the negative experiences with OCD, are that the feelings around these intrusive thoughts are very visceral. So my clients don't just think the thought; they feel the feeling. They sometimes have bodily feelings. They can even almost hear things and see things and get some kind of visual representation of what's going on. So I'm just wondering if you could give me an example, Joe or Ian, how this would help a person with OCD, how they would be able to firstly be aware, I suppose, and then secondly moderate that and manage it.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Or Joe, I know you know, India's just mentioned ACT, the word acceptance. I think you said something really lovely recently about, you know, the first step people might be able to take is about accepting what's going on inside the body. Have you got anything to say about that, Joe?
Yeah, so with interoception, you're able to sense what's going on inside your body, which can help you to start to accept these feelings. So like you said, people with OCD, when they have these obsessions, it's very, very visceral. It can feel life or death. But these feelings and emotions can also inform the body as well. So these thoughts can create feelings inside the body as well. It's all linked. Yeah. So being able to sense these bodily sensations can start to help with acceptance of these physical feelings as well, not just the thoughts.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because I think with humans, emotions seem to be very head-based, and so emotions and some of the feelings associated with OCD seem to be very based around the brain, and yet a lot of them are incredibly physical. And I think as human beings, we haven't evolved yet. We don't absolutely understand that concept, and that's where I think interoception is kind of filling in a gap, and much needed. And it also, of course, it's complementary with what we call third generation techniques, which is the direction we're moving with psychotherapy in terms of acceptance, which is what you mentioned, Joe. One thing that I've heard you both say in the past, and when I've read about interoception, I'd love you to explain to me what the body budget is. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I love that term body budget, and it's coined by Lisa Feldman Barrett, who you and I have both been inspired by her work. And it's what I think is so great about the term body budget is that it's simple. Most of us have at some point, most of us have heard about the idea of budgeting, but we've probably done some budgeting, even if it's just, you know, working out how to make your pocket money last till the end of the month or your salary. And maybe in the workplace, people have budgeted. And when we budget, what we do is we're forecasting or predicting or guessing about the future. We're saying, okay, I've got this much money, and how can this is maybe what I need to spend it on, and this is how I'm going to break that down so that I don't get myself into debt. And Lisa Barrett's term body budgeting brings that idea of prediction and anticipation and spreading your expenditure out to energy and resources in our body. And I love it for two reasons. One is that it includes that idea of anticipation, but secondly, it dissolves the boundary between our mental functions and our body. So it's saying, okay, the role of our brain is not just for thinking so that we can do all these wonderful things like poetry and art and all of that. It's really something much more basic and much more simple, and that is to keep our bodies alive and functioning well, and so that we can reproduce. So it kind of brings things back to basics, and you know, it kind of turns things on its head a little bit from where mental health research has gone for the last few decades, which has been focused on the brain and trying to figure out how the brain functions and how we can manipulate the brain, either with let's say with medications or other techniques. And it says, okay, let's acknowledge that the brain is a wonderful thing, But also let's acknowledge that the brain is within our body, and the brain's role really is to help the body work. And then we come back to this idea, okay, it's a two-way conversation between the brain and the body. It's not just the brain being the master manager sending out instructions to the body. The body sends information back to our brains, and the latest thinking is that our body actually, the state of our body, as that changes, that constrains our thinking. So if we only think, I need to think my way out of a problem, then we're missing the point that our thoughts are being constrained by the state of our body. And the importance of that is that then we think, okay, if I start to pay attention to my body, start to look after my body, rest well, eat well, then that may open me up and liberate me so that my thoughts become a little bit more flexible and I can actually find a way out of some distress or discomfort. That's a long answer to why I like the term body budget.
I actually hadn't thought about it like that. I hadn't thought that it would have very positive implications. And actually what I was going to say, Ian, while you were speaking is there's one day on the treatment that I do with clients, I do an intensive treatment with them. And on the third day, we do exposure response prevention, which is behavior work. It's the B in CBT. And it's necessarily uncomfortable because, in fact, what we're doing is exposing our clients to their discomfort and helping them habituate to it and desensitize to their triggers. But what I tend to see is a dramatic response in terms of their energy. So they'll work with me and it's uncomfortable and it's triggering and I, we help them through it. And I will say to them, how did you get on when they go home or finish at the end of the day? And they mostly say, I had to go straight to bed. I had to actually go to bed and sleep. I had nothing left.
Yeah, so that's been a huge demand on their energy budget, you could say. They've challenged themselves and you've provided a safe environment for them to do that. But it was a big demand on their energy budget. Yeah,
literally. I mean, usually those tasks aren't physical. Usually they are image-based or they're writing or we're doing a few tasks outside, out and about. But generally the process is focused on how their brain habituates to anxiety or guilt. And mostly anxiety. And you can absolutely see it's almost like the energy levels just get drained throughout the day. And at the end, they have absolutely nothing left. And they say, I feel like I ran a marathon today. It's incredible. Yeah.
The other, if I've got a question for you, India, on that topic. So I agree when we're challenged in a safe environment, even if it's safe, even if we're challenged, we're taken to places that feel uncomfortable. That is a massive energy demand on our energy budget. Another thing I'm thinking about is that, and this goes back to interoception in a way, is how similar tiredness feels to relaxation. So is it possible that during that session, as well as being demanding for them, you've shown them that they can in some way handle this stressor, and for them that's almost like a release, or could they possibly be having a relaxation response as well, and that's why they feel so tired afterwards. So they've gone from being on high alert to actually, maybe I can cope with this thing, and that's calming, tiring, relaxing. It's lowered they've allowed them to have this big sigh. Could that be operating as well?
I mean, I'm sure there's an element of that. Wouldn't it be interesting to do a project to see if we could convert that tired feeling into relaxation, that there would be something we could do so that they thought, okay, this might not be the feelings of exhaustion. This might actually be relief, some relaxation. You're quite right. And some of the work we do is quite cathartic. They will say that there is a sense of relief, and we talk to them about how they need to go past a certain point in order to feel longer in relief. There's kind of a cycle in OCD where people get triggered and then they descend into anxiety and discomfort, and they reach their boundary and they carry out a compulsion. And because they've carried out that compulsion habitually, it won't be long. There'll be a temporary relief, and it won't be long before they're triggered again. And so there's this very uncomfortable, nasty cycle that goes on throughout the day. And you might be quite right. When we break through that barrier, that boundary, maybe there is there's a letting go. There's a feeling. I'd love to study this. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fascinated as well from massage therapy. Again, sometimes people have come after a very stressful day or week, and they have a release of soft tissue, so their body is kind of released, but they say, it wiped me out. Sometimes people feel energized, but other times they're wiped out for the rest of the day, and they sleep like a log. And that clearly they've just been laying down for an hour, so they've not been running marathons or anything, but they get this massive what they sense as exhaustion. So yeah, I'm interested in how we label our experiences.
Very, very interesting. And so it seems like the body budget is a term most people really aren't familiar with, and it's just not in daily use, and yet it has huge implications for the way we operate as human beings.
I'd agree. Yeah.
Moving on to the next question. Could you give us an example, Joe and Ian, how you use interoception in your work? Just a basic example of how you work with clients.
So when I'm working with clients, I'm always trying to think about how I can find a language that will help them, and words that will help them to better understand themselves, better understand how to take control of their own energy levels. And what I've noticed, and this is my personal experience, and through thousands of conversations with people, is that often it's tempting to go down the route of thinking our way out of problems, and the idea that I need to be more efficient, I need to be smarter or strategic to get things done. And that can often lead to feelings of guilt about, not being as effective and as efficient as I should be. But what body awareness and interoception and body budgeting does is says, okay, that efficiency is great and effectiveness are good, but not to the point where it has an expense on your health. So rather than thinking about doing more and trying to kind of fix and solve all these problems with all this, mental activity, instead just think, okay, listen to my body. We've all heard that phrase very, very often, but how can I sense what's going on inside my body and start to work out how my energy levels and my stress levels are operating? And it's not always easy. It's not like you can just change a lifetime of habits overnight, but gradually you can start to be a little bit more insightful and decisive about your experiences. So I use it through, I use it to supplement hands-on work, and just to invite people to, as often as they feel able, to check into their body throughout the day and to start to develop a little bit of curiosity. Maybe beginning with acceptance is fine, just noticing what's going on in the body is fine. And once you've got a handle on noticing, then start to explore a little bit more, become like a wine connoisseur. I'm not a wine connoisseur, but people who are can tell different types of wine from one another. Can you tell different bodily sensations from one another? The different qualities in different parts of your body, and what circumstances you're in that you've got a tendency of your body reacts to different circumstances. And then is the interesting part. That's when we can start to influence the way we feel with our body. And breathing is a great example of this. Just simple breathing exercises. We're always influencing our body with our thoughts and our breathing and every change. And then finally, we don't want to spend our whole lives gazing at our navel. So after you've done all this kind of work on the body, then you want to enjoy life again and say, okay, I've soothed myself. I've influenced something very real in my body that's going to help my body budget, help my energy levels. Now I can engage in the world in a more pleasurable way. So so it's through conversation plus, little exercises and invitations for people to try out for themselves. And Joe, I don't know if you've got, from either yourself or friends and family, of how they've applied it in their own life at all. It can be something simple or more complex.
Well, I think using interoception in a similar way to, let's say when you're meditating and you use the noting technique, I think that you can use interoception in a very similar way. So when you're meditating and you're noting, you're trying to just focus on a specific thing, or it could just be a car going down the street, just mentally picturing that in your head, and you may have thoughts come into your head. And what noting is being able to say, okay, that's a thought, and just letting it pass, not dwelling on it, letting it pass, and just going back to that thought of cars going down the street or a feather going up and down as you're breathing. And I think being able to note when you're feeling certain bodily sensations, so bringing it back to interoception, that can really help come to terms with, and bringing up acceptance again, being able to accept and note, these feelings, although you're feeling them now, but they may not be as bad as you think. Some people may have really high interoceptive awareness, and they may think, okay, my heart's beating, but that might cause anxiety for them because they're worried that they might have a heart attack, or they're having heart palpitations. So being able to accept that they can feel their heart beating can be a relief.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. And have you experienced that yourself?
I have sometimes, yeah, and people that I've been around have tried to use noting in a body awareness way.
Mm.
I mean, I feel from talking to you, and again, I'm going slightly off script here, but I do feel that to now there's been body work and there's been mind work and brain work, and the connection hasn't necessarily been emphasized. I mean, I know that we've always talked about healthy body, healthy mind, and then obviously the gut mood connection and all sorts of things. But I feel that interoception answers a lot of questions and is a connection between the body and the mind that we really have discounted, or maybe we just didn't know. And maybe Lisa's work before. Can I just ask you, Ian, before Lisa's work, was anybody working on this field?
I believe so, but maybe not in the obvious or in the way that it's being presented now by an emotion, by Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's so well accepted in the scientific community. But there's practices, body focused practices that have been around for decades now, and so I remember when I was doing my undergraduate learning about the autonomic nervous system. So what that is part of our nervous system that helps regulate our body processes. So the rate of your heart, the dilation of blood vessels, how much we're sweating and so on. So that's been known about for decades. But I think the assumption was, or the belief was, that they've confused the word autonomic with automatic, and thinking that these things are all beyond our control. They're just like reflex reactions that we've got no influence over, and they operate behind the scenes without our awareness. Whereas now we know that that's not true. We know that we are aware of these things all the time. Everyone's felt their stomach rumbling and their heart beating. And there's much more joining the dots between the autonomic nervous, the nervous people studying the nervous system and the hormonal system and the immune system. So they're all starting to see, okay, these systems in our body and our nervous system, which our brain is part of, they don't work in isolation. There's a lot of crosstalk. So I think really it's more a case of joining the dots and all these different disciplines of science and therapy, trying to find a common language to say, okay, how can we see things a little bit more integrated and holistically, and start to put people back together as a whole again. Whereas before, as you said, the mind was seen as separate. And that goes back to way before the scientific revolution, René Descartes, this idea of I think, therefore I am, and dualism. So it's been in our culture that this mind is, even though it's associated with the brain, it's seen as something separate from the body, that, and our emotions are these things that they're and old ancient animal instincts that we need to battle against. I think that's all changing now. So yes, it has been studied for a long time, but I think really what we're doing with interoception research is giving it some scientific credibility, but B, giving all these different therapies and areas of research, giving them like a linchpin to work from and to focus around.
And I hope I'm not wrong in saying that the outcome for the general public is that people are much more empowered than they think they are when it comes to their mind and their body. I think that, and again, the word autonomic sounds right. This is a reaction to, we obviously cover that with we look at anxiety and we look at the fight or flight response. So we do very much look at the autonomic nervous system, but the implication has always been, this is how you respond and it's primal. And yet what we're saying is these are predictions based upon what is this experience most like, and then obviously predicting that you're going to feel like that based on your body budget. And I think one sentence that Lisa Feldman Barrett says in a video she did for a TED talk, she said, emotions are not built in, they're just built.
So incredibly simple, isn't it? That idea of building or constructing emotions. And what we've spent a lot of time on, and Joe has helped with some of the social media communication around this, is that idea of how we construct our experience from different ingredients. And Lisa Barrett says that. So, in any moment right now, we're getting visual information from looking at the screen, and sound, and we can feel our feet on the floor maybe, or our sit bones on the chair if you're sitting down. So we're getting all this information from the outside world. So there's the world around us, and we're also, if we think about it, we're aware of our breathing, we're aware of things from inside our body, but then we also, and so they're different ingredients to our experience, our emotional experience. But then there's also this other component, which is and I love that we call it our sense of imagination, because that makes it a sense as well. So these images, stories, our interpretation of what we've just picked up from the outside world and inside our body, that's a really key point as well. So those all get kind of crunched together and they feel like a single experience, but actually we haven't. And I think this is something to be very careful about, actually, that when we say we construct emotions, some people may think that that's being said in a way of accusing them of, causing their own problems. And I want to make it very clear that that's not the case. It's something that we construct. Every single experience is constructed, and it might happen as in a way that's based on habit and past experience, because our body and our brain have figured out this is the best way for me to react. But when we start to untangle those aspects of the experience, we can say, okay, these bits are working, these bits are not necessarily serving me so well, and how can I start to choose other ways of being that help me in my life and help me move forward and get over obstacles.
Yeah, so it's obviously, we mean it to be empowering and not judgmental, of course. Absolutely. So just to finish up, I wanted to ask you both, what do you consider to be the future of interoception? Can you see any other areas of application in psychotherapy or elsewhere, or maybe in sports? I've been thinking as you've been talking, you're both involved in this every day. So where do you see this going?
I can really see interoception being used in sport. Definitely with we've talked about this before, Ian, with burnout, burnout of athletes, being able to turn their interoception on and off. When turning it on when they're training so that they can be aware so they don't injure themselves, and then turning it off when they're performing so that they can really push themselves and be better than they can, which obviously can cause injuries if they push themselves too hard. But so I think interoception training in sport can be really helpful to prevent physical injury, and to also help people with the determination and being able to help athletes reach their goals. But not just in sport. I think it can be really helpful for just common workplace environments as well, especially places like Amazon and really busy warehouses, or even just retail environments where it's really a social, busy environment, a lot of work, a lot of time maybe understaffed, which can cause a lot of stress and anxiety for some people. But these interoceptive exercises that Ian has developed can really help to bring efficiency to where they work, and can help them adapt to how they're feeling, so that they can really push through and be able to receive the results that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think they're really both very practical examples that most of us can relate to, this idea of not wanting to burn out or to listen to our body. And I think that's, it's in some ways it's almost, it's like going back to the sort of thing our parents or our grandparents would say, you got to not push yourself too hard and be kind to yourself and listen to your body a little bit more. And it's almost like the solutions, the answers are already under our nose, aren't they? Or they're, we've heard them before, but it's like we need a little bit of a reminder from the research. I'm aware also there's people, Joe's talked about some things that we could all implement tomorrow if we wanted to. I'm aware from sort of just reading about the future of interoception research that people are looking at therapeutics and diagnostics that might help in a more clinical way as well, and maybe even some drugs which could alter people's interoceptive awareness. There's vagus nerve stimulators which are available on the NHS now, so I think it gives us more choices, a bigger toolkit for people to dip into to help them in their lives. My hope personally is that we don't, we use it as more, rather than going down the techie, the drugs and the interventions route and biofeedback devices. They're all great, but there is often a more, something can be commercialized much better if it's, if there's a profit behind it. But my hope is that we try and develop it as a psychotechnology, so a talking therapy, and help people that way.
I can see the benefits for people with OCD, definitely, and I think that comes across, even just teaching people that they have more say in how they feel and how and what their emotions, their feelings, their thoughts, that they have more say in what happens, and that they could predict a different outcome. And I love the word you used, Ian, because earlier you used the word label. And I think when Lisa talks about concepts, body budgeting and us using concepts, I think this is really helpful for people with OCD, because you can really see a pattern of that happening in a way that's quite dysfunctional. So I'm sure that there's a way to use it which means that they can operate much more functionally. So that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you so much, Joe. I'd like to explore this more. I feel that there's that there are a lot of conversations that we can have that will be really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And for all of these questions you've asked, we could have focused in on little aspects of them and talked in much more detail. So I really do hope that you can come on the Inner Sense channel at some point and join Joe and I again, and we can maybe focus on doing something a little, rather than an overview of interoception, we can focus on what one little aspect of it and see where we go from there.
Yeah, more specifics. We love that. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you so much, Joe, again. And hopefully I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks very much.
Thank you.